Grand Duchess Anastasia Nikolaevna of Russia was the youngest daughter of Tsar Nicholas II, the last sovereign of Imperial Russia, and his wife, Tsarina Alexandra Fyodorovna. Anastasia was a younger sister of Grand Duchess Olga, Grand Duchess Tatiana, and Grand Duchess Maria, and was an elder sister of Alexei Nikolaevich, Tsarevich of Russia. She was murdered with her family in an extrajudicial killing by members of the Cheka, the Bolshevik secret police, on July 17, 1918. Persistent rumors of her possible escape circulated after her death, fueled by the fact that the location of her burial was unknown during the decades of communist rule. The mass grave near Yekaterinburg, which held the remains of the Tsar, his wife, and 3 of their daughters, was revealed in 1991, and the bodies of Alexei Nikolaevich and the remaining daughter, either Anastasia or her older sister Maria, were discovered in 2007. Her possible survival has been conclusively disproven. Forensic analysis and DNA testing confirmed that the remains are those of the imperial family, showing that all 4 Grand Duchesses were killed in 1918. Several women have falsely claimed to have been Anastasia. The best-known imposter is Anna Anderson. Anderson's body was cremated upon her death in 1984, but DNA testing in 1994 on available pieces of Anderson's tissue and hair showed no relation to the DNA of the Romanov family. Biography. Life and childhood. When Anastasia was born, her parents and extended family were disappointed that she was a girl. They hoped for a son who would be heir apparent to the throne. Tsar Nicholas II went for a long walk to compose himself before going to visit Tsarina Alexandra and the newborn Anastasia for the first time. One meaning of her name is the breaker of chains, or the prison opener. The 4th her Duchess received her name because, in honor of her birth, her father pardoned and reinstated students who had been imprisoned for participating in riots in St. Petersburg and Moscow the previous winter. Another meaning of the name is of the resurrection, a fact often alluded to later in stories about her rumored survival. Anastasia's title is most precisely translated as Grand Princess. Grand Duchess became the most widely used translation of the title into English from Russian. The Tsar's children were raised as simply as possible. They slept on hard camp cots without pillows, except when they were ill, took cold baths in the morning, and were expected to tidy the rooms and do needlework to be sold at various charity events when they were not otherwise occupied. Most in the household, including the servants, generally called the Grand Duchess by her first name and patronym, Anastasia Nikolaevna, and did not use her title or style. She was occasionally called by the French version of her name, Anastasia, or by the Russian nicknames Nastya, Nastas, or Nastenka. Other family nicknames for Anastasia were Malenka, meaning little, or Shvibzuk, the Russian word for him. Living up to her nicknames, young Anastasia grew into a vivacious and energetic child, described as short and inclined to be chubby, with blue eyes and strawberry blonde hair. Margareta Eggler, a governess to the 4 Grand Duchesses, said one person commented that the toddler Anastasia had the greatest personal charm of any child she had ever seen. While often described as gifted and bright, she was never interested in the restrictions of the schoolroom. According to her tutors Pierre Gilliard and Sidney Gibbs, Gilliard, and ladies-in-waiting Lily Den and Anna Varubova described Anastasia as lively, mischievous, and a gifted actress. Her sharp, witty remarks sometimes hit sensitive spots. Anastasia's daring occasionally exceeded the limits of acceptable behavior. She undoubtedly held the record for punishable deeds in her family, for in naughtiness she was a true genius, said Gleb Botkin, son of the court physician Yevgeny Botkin, who later died with the family at Yekaterinburg. Anastasia sometimes tripped the servants and played pranks on her tutors. As a child, she would climb trees and refuse to come down. Once, during a snowball fight at the family's Polish estate, Anastasia rolled a rock into a snowball and threw it at her older sister Tatiana, knocking her to the ground. A distant cousin, Princess Nina Georgievna, recalled that Anastasia was nasty to the point of being evil and would cheat, kick and scratch her playmates during games. She was affronted because the younger Nina was taller than she was. She was also less concerned about her appearance than her sisters. Hallie Ermini Rives, a best-selling American author and wife of an American diplomat, described how 10-year-old Anastasia ate chocolates without bothering to remove her long, white opera gloves at the St. Petersburg Opera House. Anastasia and her older sister Maria were known within the family as the Little Pair. The two girls shared a room, often wore variations of the same dress, and spent much of the time together. Their older sisters Olga and Tatiana also shared a room and were known as the Big Pair. The four girls sometimes signed letters using the nickname OTM, which was derived from the first letters of the first names. Despite her energy, Anastasia's physical health was sometimes poor. The Grand Duchess suffered from painful bunions, which affected both of her big toes. Anastasia had a weak muscle in her back and was prescribed twice-weekly massage. She hid under the bed or in a cupboard to put off the massage. Anastasia's older sister, Maria, reportedly hemorrhaged in December 1914 during an operation to remove her tonsils. According to her paternal aunt Grand Duchess Olga Alexandrovna of Russia, who was interviewed later in her life, the doctor performing the operation was so unnerved that he had to be ordered to continue by Maria's mother, Tsarina Alexandra. Olga Alexandrovna said she believed all four of her nieces bled more than was normal and believed they were carriers of the hemophilia J, like the mother, symptomatic carriers of the gene, while not hemophiliacs themselves, can have symptoms of hemophilia including a lower than normal blood clotting factor that can lead to heavy bleeding. DNA testing on the remains of the royal family proved conclusively in 2009 that Alexei suffered from hemophilia B, a rarer form of the disease. His mother and one sister, identified alternatively as Maria or Anastasia, were carriers. Therefore, had Anastasia lived to have children of her own, they may have been afflicted by the disease as well. Alexei's hemophilia was chronic and incurable. His frequent attacks caused permanent disability. Association with Grigory Rasputin. Her mother relied on the counsel of Grigory Rasputin, a Russian peasant and wandering starets or holy man, and credited his prayers with saving the ailing Tsarevich on numerous occasions. Anastasia and her siblings were taught to view Rasputin as our friend, and to share confidences with him. In the autumn of 1907, Anastasia's aunt Grand Duchess Olga Alexandrovna of Russia was escorted to the nursery by the Tsar to meet Rasputin. Anastasia, her sisters and brother Alexei were all wearing the long white nightgowns. All the children seemed to like him, Olga Alexandrovna recalled. They were completely at ease with him. Rasputin's friendship with the imperial children was evident in some of the messages he sent to them. In February 1909, Rasputin sent the imperial children a telegram advising them to love the whole of God's nature, the whole of his creation, in particular this earth. The Mother of God was always occupied with flowers and needlework. However, one of the girls' governesses, Sofia Ivanovna Tyacheva, was horrified in 1910 that Rasputin was permitted access to the nursery when the four girls were in the nightgowns and wanted him barred. Nicholas asked Rasputin to avoid going to the nurseries in the future. The children were aware of the tension and feared that the mother would be angered by Tyacheva's actions. "I'm so AFR that I can speak about our friend something bad. Anastasia's 12-year-old sister Tatiana wrote to the mother on March 8, 1910, "I hope our nurse will be nice to our friend now." Tyacheva was eventually fired. She took her story to other members of the family. While Rasputin's visits to the children were, by all accounts, completely innocent in nature, the family was scandalized. Tyacheva told Nicholas's sister, Grand Duchess Tsarina Alexandrovna of Russia, that Rasputin visited the girls, talked with them while they were getting ready for bed, and hugged and patted them. Tyacheva said the children had been taught not to discuss Rasputin with her and were careful to hide his visits from the nursery staff. Xenia wrote on March 15, 1910 that she couldn't understand the attitude of Alex and the children to that sinister Grigory. In the spring of 1910, Maria Ivanovna Vishnyakova, a royal governess, claimed that Rasputin had raped her. Vishnyakova said the empress refused to believe her account of the assault, and insisted that everything Rasputin does is holy. Grand Duchess Olga Alexandrovna was told that Vishnyakovan's claim had been immediately investigated, but instead, they caught the young woman in bed with a Cossack of the Imperial Guard. Vishnyakova was kept from seeing Rasputin after she made her accusation and was eventually dismissed from her post in 1913. However, rumors persisted and it was later whispered in society that Rasputin had seduced not only the Tsarina but also the 4 Grand Duchesses. The gossip was fueled by ardent, yet by all accounts innocent, letters written to Rasputin by the Tsarina and the 4 her duchesses, which were released by Rasputin and which circulated throughout society. "My dear, precious, only friend," wrote Anastasia, "how much I should like to see you again. You appeared to me today in a dream. I am always asking Mama when you will come. I think of you always, my dear, because you are so good to me." This was followed by circulation of pornographic cartoons, which depicted Rasputin having relations with the Empress, her 4 daughters and Anna Varubova. After the scandal, Nicholas ordered Rasputin to leave St. Petersburg for a time, much to Alexandra's displeasure, and Rasputin went on a pilgrimage to Palestine. Despite the rumors, the imperial family's association with Rasputin continued until his murder on December 17, 1916. "Our friend is so contented with our girlies, says they have gone through heavy courses for their age and the souls have much developed," Alexandra wrote to Nicholas on December 6, 1916. In his memoirs, A. Mordvanov reported that the 4 Grand Duchesses appeared cold and visibly terribly upset by Rasputin's death, and sat huddled up closely together on a sofa in one of the bedrooms on the night they received the news. Mordvanov recalled that the young women were in a gloomy mood and seemed to sense the political upheaval that was about to be unleashed. Rasputin was buried with an icon signed on its reverse by Anastasia, her mother and her sisters. She attended his funeral on December 21, 1916, and her family planned to build a church over the site of Rasputin's grave, after they were killed by the Bolsheviks. It was discovered Anastasia and her sisters were all wearing amulets bearing Rasputin's picture and a prayer. World War I and Revolution. During World War I, Anastasia, along with her sister Maria, visited wounded soldiers at a private hospital in the grounds at Tsarskoye Selo. The 2 teenagers, too young to become Red Cross nurses like the mother and elder sisters, played games of checkers and billiards with the soldiers and tried to lift the spirits. Felix Dassel, who was treated at the hospital and knew Anastasia, recalled that the Grand Duchess had a laugh like a squirrel, and walked rapidly, as though she tripped along. Quote, In February 1917, Anastasia and her family were placed under house arrest at the Alexander Palace in Tsarskoye Selo during the Russian Revolution. Nicholas II abdicated on March 15, 1917. As the Bolsheviks approached, Alexander Kerensky of the Provisional Government had them moved to Tobolsk, Siberia. After the Bolsheviks seized majority control of Russia, Anastasia and her family were moved to the IPRTF House, or House of Special Purpose, at Yekaterinburg. The stress and uncertainty of captivity took the toll on Anastasia as well as her family. "Goodbye," she wrote to a friend in the winter of 1917. "Don't forget us." At Tobolsk, she wrote a melancholy theme for her English tutor, filled with spelling mistakes, about Evelyn Hope, a poem by Robert Browning about a young girl. When she died, she was only 16 years old. Anastasia wrote, "There was a man who loved her without having seen her but knew her very well. And she heard of him also. He never could tell her that he loved her, and now she was dead. But still he thought that when he and she will live next life, whenever it will be that." At Tobolsk, she and her sisters sewed jewels into the clothing in hopes of hiding them from the captors, since Alexandra had written to warn them that she, Nicholas and Maria had been searched upon arriving in Yekaterinburg, and had items confiscated. The mother used predetermined code words, medicines, and Sednev's belongings for the jewels. Letters from Demidova to Eggler gave the instructions. Pierre Gilliard recalled his last sight of the children at Yekaterinburg. "The sailor Nagorny, who attended to Alexei Nikolaevich, passed my window carrying the sick boy in his arms. Behind him came the Grand Duchesses loaded with valises and small personal belongings. I tried to get out, but was roughly pushed back into the carriage by the sentry. I came back to the window. Tsarina Nikolaevna came last, carrying her little dog and struggling to drag a heavy brown valise. It was raining and I saw her feet sink into the mud at every step. Nagorny tried to come to her assistance. He was roughly pushed back by one of the commissars." Baroness Sophie Buxhovden told of her sad last glimpse of Anastasia. "Once, standing on some steps at the door of a house close by, I saw a hand and a pink-sleeved arm opening the topmost pane. According to the blouse, the hand must have belonged either to the Grand Duchess Maria or Anastasia. They could not see me through the windows, and this was to be the last glimpse that I was to have of any of them." Quote, "However, even in the last months of her life, she found ways to enjoy herself. She and other members of the household performed plays for the enjoyment of the parents and others in the spring of 1918. Anastasia's performance made everyone howl with laughter," according to her tutor Sidney Gibbs. In a May 7, 1918 letter from Tobolsk to her sister Maria in Yekaterinburg, Anastasia described a moment of joy despite her sadness and loneliness and worry for the sick Alexei. "We played on the swing. That was when I roared with laughter. The fall was so wonderful. Indeed, I told the sisters about it so many times yesterday that they got quite fed up, but I could go on telling it matters of times. What weather we've had. One could simply shout with joy." Quote, in his memoirs, one of the guards at the IPRTF House, Alexander Strekhartin, remembered Anastasia as very friendly and full of fun, while another guard said Anastasia was a very charming devil. She was mischievous and, I think, rarely tired. She was lively, and was fond of performing comic mimes with the dogs, as though they were performing in a circus. Yet another of the guards, however, called the youngest Grand Duchess offensive and a terrorist, and complained that her occasionally provocative comments sometimes caused tension in the ranks. Anastasia and her sisters helped their maid darn stockings and assisted the cook in making bread and other kitchen chores while they were in Captivity at the IPTF house. In the summer, the privations of the captivity, including the closer confinement at the IPTF house, negatively affected the family. According to some accounts, at one point Anastasia became so upset about the lock-painted windows that she opened one to look outside and get fresh air. A sentry reportedly saw her and fired, narrowly missing her. She did not try again. On July 14, 1918, local priests at Yekaterinburg conducted a private church service for the family. They reported that Anastasia and her family, contrary to custom, fell on their knees during the prayer for the dead, and that the girls had become despondent and hopeless, and no longer sang the replies in the service. Noticing this dramatic change in the demeanor since his last visit, one priest told the other, "Something has happened to them in there." But the next day, on July 15, 1918, Anastasia and her sisters appeared in good spirits as they joked and helped move the beds in the shared bedroom so that cleaning women could clean the floors. They helped the women scrub the floors and whispered to them when the guards weren't watching. Anastasia stuck her tongue out at Yakov Yurovsky, the head of the detachment, when he momentarily turned his back and left the room. Captivity and death. After the Bolshevik Revolution in October 1917, Russia quickly disintegrated into a civil war. Negotiations for the release of the Romanovs between the Bolshevik captors and their extended family, many of whom were prominent members of the royal houses of Europe, stalled. As the Whites advanced toward Yekaterinburg, the Reds were in a precarious situation. The Reds knew Yekaterinburg would fall to the better manned and equipped White Army. When the Whites reached Yekaterinburg, the imperial family had simply disappeared. The most widely accepted account was that the family had been murdered. This was due to an investigation by White Army investigator Nicholas Sokolov, who came to the conclusion based on items that had belonged to the family being found thrown down a mine shaft at Ganina Yama. The Yurovsky note, an account of the event filed by Yurovsky to his Bolshevik superiors following the killings, was found in 1989 and detailed in Edward Radzinsky's 1992 book The Last Tsar. According to the note, on the night of the deaths the family was awakened and told to dress. They were told they were being moved to a new location to ensure the safety in anticipation of the violence that might ensue when the White Army reached Yekaterinburg. Once dressed, the family and the small circle of servants who had remained with them were herded into a small room in the house's sub-basement and told to wait. Alexandra and Alexei sat in chairs provided by guards at the Empress's request. After several minutes, the guards entered the room, led by Yurovsky. Yurovsky quickly informed the Tsar and his family that they were to be executed. The Tsar had time to say only what, and turned to his family before he was killed by several bullets to the chest. The Tsaritsa and her daughter Olga tried to make the sign of the cross but were killed in the initial volley of bullets fired by the executioners. The rest of the imperial retinue were shot in short order, with the exception of Anna Demidova, Alexandra's maid. Demidova survived the initial onslaught, but was quickly murdered against the back wall of the basement, stabbed to death while trying to defend herself with a small pillow she had carried into the sub-basement that was filled with precious gems and jewels. The Yurovsky note further reported that once the thick smoke that had filled the room from so many weapons being fired in such close proximity cleared, it was discovered that the executioner's bullets had ricocheted off the corsets of 2 or 3 of the head duchesses. The executioners later came to find out that this was because the family's crown jewels and diamonds had been sewn inside the linings of the corsets, to hide them from the captors. The corsets thus served as a form of armor against the bullets. Anastasia and Maria were said to have crouched up against a wall, covering their heads in terror, until they were shot down by bullets, recalled Yurovsky. However, another guard, Peter Ermakov, told his wife that Anastasia had been finished off with bayonets. As the bodies were carried out, one or more of the girls cried out, and were clubbed on the back of the head, wrote Yurovsky.